They didn't even ask her name. That's the part that stuck with me. They didn't ask why she walked with a limp or why the scar on her jaw curved like it had been carved with fire. They didn't ask what her patch meant or where she'd been. They just saw a faded uniform and assumed it was a costume. Maybe it was the way the threads hung off the sleeves like they'd been through hell and a few laundromats along the way. Or maybe they just needed someone to laugh at. Either way, they picked the wrong woman. The depot had been loud all morning, voices bouncing between metal racks and dusty crates, until a Brigadier General walked in, saw the tag on her arm, and everything stopped. You could feel the silence like humidity. Now, if you're wondering what he saw and why those boys turned sheet white, stick around. This one's not about medals or headlines. It's about quiet strength. It's about memory. And it's about what happens when the truth stands up without ever raising its voice. Fort Bradstone didn't wake up so much as sweat to life. You could feel it in your back teeth, that sticky southern air hanging thick between the rows of barracks and gravel parking lots. It was the kind of Monday that smelled like diesel and burnt coffee and promised to be hotter than the devil's skillet by noon. Humvees grumbled awake, NCOs barked like dogs guarding routines, and boots hit pavement in rhythm. The morning formation heartbeat of any army base. The supply depot sat at the edge of the motor pool like a stubborn blister, all dull metal and tired paint, never quite air-conditioned enough. Inside, the air buzzed with fluorescent lights and the low hum of barely functioning terminals. Cardboard boxes stacked like short walls, each filled with the quiet, necessary things. Gloves, boots, duct tape, canteens. It was the kind of place where routine ruled, where a deviation was a disruption. And on this particular morning, that disruption walked in wearing the pass like it was sewn into her skin. Her name was Sergeant First Class Evelyn Reyes. Retired, technically, though you'd never know it from the way she carried herself. Straight-backed, sharp-eyed, like posture was a habit and not a choice. She had the kind of presence that made people look twice, even if they didn't know why. Gray hair tied back, face lined with stories she'd never tell. The limp in her right leg wasn't dramatic, just enough to suggest a memory that still echoed. Her jacket, regulation green, older than most of the soldiers on base, was worn at the seams and sun-faded. You had to squint to see the shape of the patch on her shoulder, the kind of patch that wasn't in any online catalog or uniform shop. There were scars, sure, one along her jaw, another on her forearm, shrapnel by the look of it, but she wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was there as a volunteer, helping out with weekend logistics. No fanfare, no demand for respect. Just a list of items on a clipboard and a quiet dignity that didn't ask for permission. They saw her before she even made it to the counter. 3 young lieutenants, all shiny brass and freshly pressed ambition, were gathered near the boot rack. They were the kind of officers who thought rank came with wisdom and confidence meant experience. One of them, tall, square-jawed, name tape reading Halverson, elbowed his buddy with a grin. "Trick or treats early this year," he said, not bothering to lower his voice. The others snickered. "That jacket's got more miles than my dad's Buick," another chimed in, Lieutenant Drake by the patch. "Probably found it at a flea market. Bet she's got a story about saving the president or something." The third, nervous laugh, name tag reading Vickers, offered, "Maybe she's one of those fake vets. Stolen valor types. Wears the look, hopes no one asks questions." Their voices were low enough to claim innocence, loud enough to hit their mark. Evelyn didn't flinch, didn't turn, just kept checking boxes off her list, one by one. The private behind the counter looked like he'd barely finished shaving, eyes wide, hands fidgeting with the scanner like it might explode. Evelyn handed over her paperwork, neatly printed, authorized, signed off by a logistics officer with more stamps than a passport. "Ma'am," he said hesitantly, tapping at his terminal, "the system says we need active duty clearance or a unit code." She nodded, pulled out another form. He read it, flipped it over, squinted, tapped again. "It won't let me override. I might need my supervisor, but he's in the morning brief." His voice trailed off. Halverson stepped in like a hawk smelling blood. "Let me see that," he said, grabbing the paper like it owed him money. He held it up like he was looking for hidden ink. Pretty official looking. But we've seen these before. Fancy printer, old ID badge. People get creative. The private looked between them, unsure who to listen to. Evelyn said nothing, just stepped back, sat down on the cold metal bench by the wall, clipboard resting on her knee like she had all day. She didn't need to say a word. That silence was louder than any argument. She'd waited in worse places, on tarmacs, in bunkers, in briefing rooms where no one dared say what the mission actually was. Across the room, the lieutenants resumed their game. Bet she's got a shelf full of those jackets, Drake said, kicking a boot box into place. Whole rack of fake medals, too. You know the type. War stories nobody can verify. Vickers laughed, tapping a Red Bull against his knee. Always classified, right? If I told you, I'd have to kill you. The private behind the counter avoided her eyes. One of the warrant officers wandered by, glanced at Evelyn, and kept moving. Nobody noticed the contractor hauling crates in the back stop mid-stride when he caught a glimpse of her patch. His face changed, not confusion. Recognition. And just like that, he turned on his heel and vanished into the storage room. Then everything changed. The depot doors opened with a hiss, and in walked a man who moved like the air bent around him. Brigadier General Marcus Ellison, combat fatigues that hadn't seen an iron in a year, tattoos on both forearms, one airborne wings, the other a wolf's head. The kind of man who didn't need to raise his voice to make a room go still. He carried a tray with 4 coffees, steam curling in the stale depot air. He stopped behind the lieutenants and set the tray down just loud enough for the mugs to clink. No one had heard him coming. No one spoke. He didn't look at them, just picked up a 5th cup, black, no cream, and walked straight across the room. He stopped in front of Evelyn, casting a shadow that stretched across her boots. "That patch on your shoulder," he said quietly. She didn't look up. "Where'd you serve with the 213th? For the first time all morning, her spine straightened. "Started with them in Ghost Ridge, finished outside Fallujah." The depot went silent, like a vacuum had sucked all the sound out. What she said didn't mean anything to most people, but to General Ellison, it was everything. Those weren't just places. They were shadows on a classified map. Ghost Ridge, Fallujah under blackout, operations with names no one put on plaques. "You ran with Spectre Unit?" he asked. She nodded. "Echo Detachment, 7 years." His jaw clenched. "I lost 4 men that night in the ravine. Your team pulled out the wounded under mortar fire. We thought you were ghosts." She met his eyes, quiet, steady. "That's what they called us." Behind them, the young officers had frozen mid-laugh. The contractor peeked from the storage room. Even the forklift in the back stopped moving. General Ellison turned and raised his voice just enough. "I need whoever's in charge of this facility. Now." A staff sergeant materialized like he'd been summoned by thunder. Ellison didn't wait. This woman served under blackout orders, triple red protocol. You give her what she needs. No forms, no waiting, no questions. The sergeant snapped a salute. "Yes, sir." You could see the shift like a curtain being pulled. The private who'd hesitated earlier was already tapping override codes like his life depended on it. New boots appeared, a hydration pack, gloves, regulation, new issue. The mocking lieutenants stood like they were hoping the floor might swallow them. Vickers had gone pale. Halverson looked like he'd aged a year and 5 minutes. Drake tried to speak and thought better of it. Evelyn said nothing. She didn't need to. One by one, the gears of the depot turned in her favor, not because she demanded it, but because the truth had finally shown its face. And when Halverson stepped forward, eyes lowered, voice quiet, and said, "Ma'am, I want to apologize. I didn't realize." She looked at him with eyes that had seen war and worse. "You didn't ask," she said, and that was all. She left without fanfare. Just another person walking out into the Georgia sun, gear in hand, boots under her arm, no medals, no handshake, no rank pinned back on. Just a woman who had done her duty, quietly, completely, and who now had what she came for. Word would spread, of course. They always do. By evening chow, every unit on base would know about the woman in the worn-out jacket with the patch no one recognized, until someone who mattered did. Evelyn Reyes didn't need validation. She just needed boots. But along the way, she reminded a few young men that respect isn't worn on the outside. It's carried, and that sometimes ghosts do walk among us. You just have to look closely enough to see them. Sometimes it's the quiet ones who've carried the heaviest weight, the ones with no stories to tell because they signed papers that said they never existed, the ones who wait calmly while the world forgets them until someone remembers. If you've ever judged someone by what they wear, maybe ask first. And if you've ever known someone like Evelyn Reyes, someone who served in silence and never asked for recognition, share the story with them. Hit that subscribe button if these stories matter to you. Because around here, we remember the ones the world forgot. The